Hello and welcome back. You're tuned into TMH Daily English News. The headlines today: UN have set to resume their humanitarian operations in Tigray. New video exposes atrocities that have been committed by the Ethiopian government forces in the Tigray region, and Tigrayans in the UN peacekeeping force fear their return back to Ethiopia. As we move on to the main stories today, UN set to resume humanitarian operations in Tigray. Getachew Reda, member of the Tigray Armed Forces, said the UN has decided to, apparently with the cooperation of federal and regional authorities, to resume humanitarian operations in Tigray region. According to Getachew Reda, this is the first convoy is slated to hit the road anytime soon. He says this is a welcome of long overdue development. He also stated that the government of Tigray will do everything it can to ensure the safe and secure passage of the humanitarian aid convoys and their personnel with its areas of control. We are ready to extend any support we can in order for the UN operations to succeed and for the needy to have access to the badly needed aid, as Getachew Reda added. New video exposes some of the atrocities that have been committed by the Ethiopian government forces during their 8-month occupation of Tigray. The new video shows Ethiopian government troops brutally killing Tigrayan civilians of Debre Abay locality. Let's take a listen.
ምንም ማስተረፍ አያስፈልግም እነሱ እናታቸው ተው በእናት ወይ እሺ
That gruesome video was recorded by the perpetrators who fled Tigray earlier or were pushed out by the Tigrayan forces last June. The UN is accused of failing to fully support the hundreds of ethnic Tigrayan members of the UN peacekeeping force as they fear returning back home. Ethiopian peacekeepers of Tigrayan origin told the Associated Press that they have potential detention amid the country's genocidal war on Tigray waiting for them. Accounts of the peacekeeper highlights the concerns among the Tigrayans after thousands of them, both military personnel or even civilians, were detained throughout Ethiopia after the country's war erupted in November of 2020. Two Tigrayan peacekeepers told the AP that they and hundreds of other colleagues have ended their UN peacekeeping stints in Abyei, a region contested by Sudan and South Sudan, and are now expected to return back to Ethiopia. They asserted that their peacekeeping camp is under Ethiopian control and the UN personnel are not allowed access. Sergeant Angasom Gabru, who slipped away from the camp with a few dozen others, said the remaining Tigrayan peacekeepers can only walk away safely once they are taken to local airports for flights back to Ethiopia, which begin this week. But as Tigrayans refuse to board them, he said there are fears that those still in the peacekeeping camps could possibly face retaliation. Dozens of Tigrayan peacekeepers held a protest against the war in Ethiopia this week. A photo taken and shared by Angasom shows the men and women with their blue UN passes around their necks, standing and handwritten sign reading, "Stop the genocide in Tigray." The Tigray region of some 6 million people have been largely blockaded by Ethiopia's government since June of last year. A spokesman for Ethiopia's military and government did not respond to question about the Tigrayan peacekeepers with the UN's mission, and Ethiopia's government has sought to portray a return to normalcy at home after the Tigrayan forces withdrew into their region in December, but although it continued to bombard the Tigrayan civilians as well as their infrastructure. The two peacekeepers told AP that the Ethiopian authorities at the camp told the Tigrayans that they would not be harmed if they returned home, but they said they weren't reassured and that they and their colleagues who left the camp are sheltering with newly arrived peacekeepers from Ghana. The Tigrayans described themselves as stranded in a remote region on the border between two of the world's most troubled countries, Sudan and South Sudan. In a statement to AP, a UN peacekeeping spokesperson said a number of peacekeepers have chosen not to return and are asking international protection as they are being protected by the UN in a secure location. The spokesperson said the United Nations continues to engage at all levels to allow the peacekeeping personnel to make a free decision to either repatriate or to seek asylum in view of their fears to return home, adding that the responsibility to grant asylum lies with the Sudanese authorities, who are assisted by the UN Refugee Agency in receiving them as well. Ethiopia is one of the top 5 troops contributing countries to the UN peacekeeping missions, and the nation's war has turned the homecoming of Ethiopian peacekeepers into sometimes fraught or even physical affairs. A number of efforts have been undertaken over the past year that has resulted in Ethiopian peacekeepers who were due to rotate out of our mission seeking asylum in the countries where they were serving, UN spokesman Farhan Haq said in a statement on Wednesday. After nearly 3 decades of rapid growth, Tigray's educational system has been on a standstill over the past 2 years. The corona pandemic, followed by the deliberate and systematic destruction of schools across the state, has devastated the system. Tigray had built over 2,200 elementary schools, 271 secondary schools, and 4 universities in total in the past few decades. With the rapid expansion of primary education across the state, Tigray was on a sure course to eradicate illiteracy completely. Shishai Amara, head of Tigray's Bureau Education, said Tigray's education system was completely collapsed after being targeted of a deliberate and systematic destruction by the allied Ethiopian and Eritrean forces. More than 2 million children would have been learning this year if it hadn't been for this ongoing conflict and war. He added the systematic destruction of schools in Tigray was clear indicative of the genocidal intents of the Ethiopian and Eritrean invaders. Putin's comments have UN chief worried about perversion of peacekeeping concepts of nations meet on Ukraine's crises. Guterres, in action in the face of Eritrea's invasion of Tigray and its ongoing occupation of a large chunk of Tigray's territory, has dismayed many Tigrayans. The United Nations General Assembly gathered on Wednesday for a cessation dedicated to discussion of the crises unfolding on Ukraine's borders. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who cut short a planned international trip to speak at this General Assembly on Wednesday, told the Assembly in his opening remarks that the world was currently facing a moment of peril. On Tuesday, Guterres said the UN and the entire international system are being tested. We must pass this test, he stated. The UN chief has called for an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine's eastern Donbas region, where simmering 8-year war between Russian-backed separatists and Ukrainian forces has escalated dramatically over the last week. Russian leader Vladimir Putin unilaterally recognized the breakaway regions of Donbas, Luhansk, and Donetsk as independent of Ukraine on Tuesday and ordered his forces to enter the area for peacekeeping duties. Guterres appeared annoyed by Putin's use of the term, saying he was concerned about the perversion of the concept of peacekeeping. When the troops of one country enter the territory of another, without its consent, they are not impartial peacekeepers. The Horn of Africa analyst Rashid Abdi said Tigrayans will be bemused by Guterres' comment. The UN is living with the fact that Eritrea invaded Ethiopia and it's still occupying a large chunk of territory, and 8 million people are currently under siege and starving. If you betray your principle in one member state, Ethiopia, you cannot uphold it in Ukraine, Rashid Abdi said, exposing the UN Secretary General's double standards. Another commentator said Guterres' comments make him question what the UN chief would have said if Ukraine had been, in fact, an African country. That concludes our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Take care.